let's look at the tools and processes companies undergo to even decide where to start in developing an ESG strategy. Let's dive into materiality. When assessing ESG disclosures, you as an analyst will always want to determine whether the company has undergone a materiality analysis. A materiality analysis is the process of identifying the ESG issues most impactful to a company's business success and most important to its stakeholders. Understanding a materiality analysis enables you to get a glimpse into their perspective on high-priority concerns and the risks that they consider to be most material to business success. As an analyst, the stakeholder aspect provides you with an idea as to where opposition may lie and the extent of material risk associated with these opposing stakeholder interests. If a company hasn't undergone a materiality analysis, it's safe to say their approach to ESG is less mature, and they don't have a holistic understanding of the relevant ESG priorities they should address. There's no uniform approach to a materiality analysis outside of the content for the two axes: impact on business success and importance to stakeholders. As a financial analyst, you can use the materiality assessment to get an idea of where a company sees its greatest risks to the business and the welfare of its key stakeholders, and you can leverage the analysis as a tool for measuring the efficacy and maturity of the company's work on ESG in general. We've gone through some very specific examples of how an environmental, social, and governance issue can inform potential risks and opportunities. Now let's explore what happens when multiple environmental, social, and governance issues across categories converge in real time. Although ESG issues are neatly packaged into three separate categories, the reality is that they often converge to create novel risks that reverberate across supply chains, interdependent industries, and entire communities. As social and environmental issues collide, the quality of governance is the determining factor in treating changing market and non-market contexts as both risks and opportunities. In addition to novel risk, comprehension and identification of material ESG issues can unearth unmet customer bases and markets, product innovation, and new business models adapted to these changes in market and non-market factors. For example, a food service company who relies heavily on animal protein revenues could see their raw material input costs increase due to water scarcity and rising costs, and rising temperatures could require increased expenditures for their manufacturing plant refrigeration systems. These issues are risks to their key revenue streams, but also present unique opportunities. As consumer preferences for plant-based proteins continue to grow exponentially, this food service company could capitalize on this trend by integrating plant-based proteins into their key offerings. Not only does this capture an emerging customer base and capitalize on a consumer preference change, but it also reduces the amount of water required for production and reduces the amount of refrigeration and associated power needed to store these products. Chapter 3, Corporate Pressures and Stakeholder Expectations. Now that you know what ESG is and what some of the key issues are and how they impact a business, we'll now discuss how to look at corporate pressures and stakeholder expectations and what those mean to risk identification and business success. As an analyst combing through ESG disclosures, you'll often see references to stakeholder value creation and stakeholder capitalism. These are important concepts that should have a bearing on capital allocation decisions. First, you need to understand what a stakeholder is. A stakeholder is essentially any individual or entity who's affected by or can affect the business. Stakeholder groups can be both internal and external to a company, including owners, employees, customers, supply chain partners, investors, local communities, government and NGOs, and civil society. As you can imagine, the quality of these relationships can often dictate the company's ability to anticipate and manage risks and opportunities. Effective stakeholder management can also support a company's crisis response and business continuity planning. The interdependence and interconnectedness of stakeholder welfare and corporate profitability demonstrates that ESG is just good business. If you're assessing a company's risk exposure and there's no mention of their approach to stakeholder management, you can assume that it's a risk to the business in and of itself. Let's spend some time on these stakeholder groups and the material implications for how a company responds to them. Investors. The world's largest institutional investors have publicly declared ESG criteria will guide their decision-making on investment decisions. This is particularly true with regards to climate-related risk. Investors are holding companies accountable for progress on ESG issues, enhanced disclosure and reporting, and the integration of ESG risk and opportunity management into their corporate strategies. Fundamentally, investors are expecting greater clarity, greater accountability measures for ESG efforts and their intended outcomes. In 2020, the world's largest institutional investor, BlackRock, publicly announced that ESG issues will be guiding all their decision-making moving forward, prompting the investment community to follow suit. Customers and supply chain partners. Businesses that are B2B or sell to other businesses are expected to contribute to customers' ESG goals, since supply chains are now considered a part of the company's footprint and respective impacts. Now, supply chain partner ESG maturity is key to both customer acquisition for the supplier and corporate risk management. In consumer-facing businesses, B2C, traditional drivers like price and convenience are stable but evolving drivers, including company transparency, labor relations, product safety, and the environmental and social impacts of corporate behavior, and their supply chain partners are becoming equally important consumer decision-making drivers. Employees. Employee engagement has a positive correlation with a company's ESG maturity. In the talent wars of today's labor market, companies that serve a higher purpose than just generating profit attract and retain better talent. This will only become increasingly important as millennials are the largest, most educated, and most diverse demographic group in the workforce, and they've been responsible for influencing societal norms around key ESG issues. Gen Z, the youngest group in the workforce, have been engaged in these types of issues throughout their childhoods and expect their employers to share these values as they enter their professional careers. Communities and civil society. Local leaders expect direct engagement on local economic, environmental, and social issues over corporate philanthropy. Throwing money at problems while continuing to operate in ways that create the problems in the first place is a key criticism of philanthropy-driven CSR, or corporate social responsibility. Companies are expected to engage on local issues that impact the community. Instead of sponsoring local little leagues or similar efforts peripheral to the real material risks of the business, issues such as local workforce development and employment or community partnerships on reducing carbon emissions are examples of modern expectations. As an analyst, the way in which a company responds to these expectations is for you a good indicator of how they're managing risks in the short term and planning for potential risks on the horizon.